The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now, on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
Welcome to the Talk Station, and you are listening to Faith Matters. My name is Pastor Bill Klear. I'm the pastor of Open Door Baptist Church in Morehead City, and today I have my good friends with me.
Bryan Lassiter, pastor at Creek United Methodist Church.
And Blake Larson, pastor at Liberty Church in Havelock.
This is Faith Matters on the Talk Station, a radio program where just a handful of local pastors get together and talk about some often not so local news. So what's going on in the news these days? And we're going to take a look at it from, of course, a faith perspective. So today we are going to jump right in with an article that has, I think, a very large view perspective over all of America. Bryan, you got a piece for us today?
I sure do. This first one comes from The Stream, and it's written by Tom Gilson. The title of it is, Why Do Christians Have Such a Rotten Image, and Why Are So Many Leaders Trying to Fix It the Wrong Way? And the article says, everyone knows how bad Christians look these days. We're intolerant, we're non-accepting, we refuse to agree that some things are just fine, especially homosexuality and transgenderism. We're insufferable in many ways, says the Barna Group president David Kinnaman and co-author Gabe Lyons. They revealed, telling us that we've got a serious image problem. The question is then, what should we do about it? Can we improve our image? More importantly, can we improve our witness? We'd better get this right, or we'll end up taking responsibility for the wrong things, which is exactly what I see some Christian leaders doing, even to the point of drifting away from biblical truth. Sex and gender is the big issue. If we could at least get this one right, our image would be so much improved, right? Wrong. It's not just Christians doing wrong. It's also Christians doing right, but then being labeled wrong, and it's activist strategic manipulation of our image purposely making us look wrong. One of those we should be taking responsibility for, the others not so much. We can't dodge our own part in the problem. We've heard too many stories of people getting mercilessly booted out of church and family for coming out as homosexual, bi, or trans. Christians need to own that as our error, and we ought to repent of it. Jesus was absolutely a friend of sinners, which includes you and me. Ate with them, taught them, accepted them. Therefore, so should we. We have a real room to grow here. And then the second thing, doing right but being labeled as wrong. In what we do, Jesus accepted sinners, though what was his image? Come as you are, feel free to stay as you are. Some churches seem to think so, but I shake my head and wonder, where did they get that kind of Jesus from? The real Jesus was nothing like that. His invitation was wide open to all and always has been, but it comes with terms. One of the clearest of those terms is that sinners are welcome, but promoting sin isn't. We who follow him must preach the same thing, including the call to repent. And that may not be popular, and it may not do our image problem any good at all, but it's still the right thing to do. We cannot avoid teaching the truth, including the truth about sexual morality. Our image will suffer for it, so be it. I choose to pursue truth over reputation. And then the third way that we are malaligned is the manipulation by activist rhetoric. Some of our bad reputation comes from activists' intentional, purposeful manipulation of the culture's rhetoric. That's not conspiracy theorizing. That's come straight from the strategic document, The Overhauling of Straight America, written in 1987. It's the most disturbingly brilliant strategic document I've ever seen. They laid out the plan, they followed it, and it works. Here's a sample. We've already indicated some of the images which might be damaging to the homophobic vendetta. ranting and hateful religious extremists, neo-Nazi, Ku Klux Klansmen, made to look evil and ridiculous. These images should be combined with those of our gay victims by a method propagandists call the bracket technique. For example, for a few seconds, an unconscious, beady-eyed Southern preacher is seen pounding the pulpit in rage about those sick, abominable creatures. While this tirade continues over the soundtrack, the picture switches to photos of gays who look decent, harmless, and likable. And then we cut back to the poisonous face of that preacher, and so forth. The contrast speaks for itself. The effect is devastating. Well, folks, that's a lot of that article, but it shows that this idea that they have promoted here is very real. There's some things that we do that cause our reputation to take a hit, and there's other things that we really cannot do anything about that cause us not to look good in the public eye.
Yeah. For me, I think the answer is fairly simple. It's just difficult because we struggle with this in the same way anybody would, no matter your faith. Human beings struggle being genuine. And I think on one hand, we feel pretty safe to express our beliefs around people who we know believe similarly. I think we would be less vocal. Most of us would be less vocal about some things around other people so that we don't sound offensive to them. And the reality is that sometimes we could get up. We're all preachers here. We could all get up at the pulpit and we could express sympathy for people who have been wronged, who are also in the wrong in their lifestyles. And it would be perceived as us saying that we approve of what they're doing, right? But we've just got to make sure that we are, pretty genuine. Disagreement is viewed as hatred nowadays.
Right.
And that's a dangerous thing. And I've seen that, on both sides.
Yeah.
But
and I would also say, kind of on the same thing that you're saying, Blake, to sort of back that up, I'd say that not only is disagreement, seen as hatred, but also, pointing out someone else's wrong, seemingly in our culture today, connotates that everything that I do is right.
yes,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I say, hey, you are lying and that's a sin and God has very serious things to say about that, then somehow in our culture that's become equated with, and I never ever do it. Or else
Right.
if I did, I'm a hypocrite.
right. The reaction from somebody would be, oh, so you've never lied.
Right.
So, but I know you have. You've done something. And you would say,
So you can't tell me.
yeah, you're totally conflating two arguments then.
Which is why I love just admitting out at the beginning, hey, I'm a hypocrite. However, I can see that
Yes.
because it sort of disarms that, in a sense. And I think that this article, points a little bit to that as well. Yeah, when we're doing wrong, we need to be open and transparent with that. We don't try to whitewash history, or we don't try to clean up and give some revisionist history. I know that all of my heroes except for one are flawed, and that's just the Bible again. We're Bible men, and the Bible is absolutely replete with showing us time and time and time and time and time again that there's only one hero of the story.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And, the article goes to a great length to talk about the things that we as the church can do versus the things that we in the church should not be doing and should not be owning. And, it talks about us owning the things that you were just talking about, being real and speaking truth even when it hurts. Right. But we also have to be very careful about changing the things that we speak and the things that we preach to make them more popular among people.
Right.
Because that's not our focus as the church. And when it is, we're no longer the church. Yeah. We are the church of Jesus Christ together. Three different denominations here this morning, and we all have the same focus. We are together in our focus of promoting the good news of Jesus Christ and leading people to salvation. And that is the focus that the church has to have, regardless of how bad we look, and we still have to speak truth.
Yeah, we cannot accommodate the message of the gospel.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. You can't accommodate. You have to preach truth because it is the truth that sets people free. At the same time, I think we've got some rotten apples in our bunch, right? I think it's important to police our own crazy.
Absolutely.
Why were you pointing a finger at Brian when you said that? Blake, I don't know why.
I like your statement that we got to police our own crazy. And that has to come first on a Sunday morning, what we speak from the pulpit. We have to police that and make sure that is already accurate and correct so that we don't, we lessen the opportunity to be misunderstood.
Sure. Do you remember some years back? Do you remember there was a shooting at a gay nightclub in Orlando?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Chick-fil-A, which is well known for supporting traditional marriage, they took that as an opportunity. They came out and brought food to all the victims.
Right.
By the way, on a Sunday. So let me just say, they experienced something with Chick-fil-A I've never had, which is Chick-fil-A on a Sunday. But there was a need
Samaritan's
there.
Purse also went, and Franklin Graham is often in the crosshairs of the quote-unquote culturally left as someone who hates or spews hate toward people of different worldviews, and it's just not the case, and that is very much what he was talking about in his article. About even when we're silent, we're wrong, and when we speak, we're wrong. We can do nothing about that. And so there's no need for us to kind of expend, energy on that. Instead, we need to be forgiving, and we need to be transparent with our own need for forgiveness, as well. So, if we can take those under advisement, while at the same time not accommodating the message of the gospel, and also fencing and protecting the quote unquote flock, as well. There are times where someone must be dismissed from our assemblies.
I think genuine in the presentation of the gospel and genuine in our love for people.
Yeah.
Amen.
Good.
Amen. Yes. Thanks for joining us for this first segment of Faith Matters this morning. We will be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the talk station. It's Smart Radio, and we're glad to be with you this morning as we're continuing the second segment of Faith Matters. And we have an interesting article again for you this morning. Do you have some for us on that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. This article comes from The Stream, and it's called "Christianity Has Nothing to Hide." It's a really great article, authored by John Stonestreet and Maria Baer. And here's just a clip of it. It says, many say that they want to build a world without Christianity, but many secular thinkers are discovering that they should be careful what they wish for. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in the case of a public high school football coach who was fired for praying on the field after games. Though the firing should never have happened, this now years-long controversy has provided a window into how many in our culture feel about Christian prayer. Hint, they're not positive feelings. And still, one specific prayer known as the Serenity Prayer remains a part of our shared cultural language and a staple of addiction recovery meetings, where it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, as a side note, that is not a scripture, but that is a widely accepted prayer. It says here, the Alcoholics Anonymous official position is that the, quote, God of the Serenity Prayer can be any sort of higher power you wish. But it is profound that most addiction recovery programs continue to stubbornly insist that faith is critical for addiction recovery. That insistence is backed by a constantly growing mountain of data, which has become unignorable. Even the government quietly admits that faith-based recovery programs are the most effective. Now, you would think if it's the most effective, you would think that, again, as the title of this article says, Christianity would have nothing to hide. But a lot of times when you take a faith-based approach to some of these key issues in culture, the first reaction you get is some form of pushback. Even if they tend to agree, even if they're a different denomination or Christian, they would say, well, I don't want that here. There's Christians I know who don't want any measure of faith in school systems and that were offended and outraged for a football coach to be praying. But what I do think is also interesting is at the very end of the article, one of the last things that the author says is the authors say this. They say, the church's great opportunity is not to say, I told you so, but rather come and see. The world is better because Christianity is true, Now come and meet the one behind it all. So I guess what I would just start off, here and see what you guys think. I know that for years and years and years, frankly, before my time, it used to be when you did good things, when you did charitable things, when you did kind things, it was called, that's the Christian thing to do. And this would be said by people who weren't even necessarily Christians, but they would say, well, that would be the Christian thing. I'm going to try and do something good. And I'm just wondering if we've gotten too much of a reputation in different eras for the good things that we do rather than our connection or our relationship to the Lord himself. We would say, well, we'll help you, but we wouldn't help them get to know him. But I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do think that you've got a point there, Blake. For so long, just looking at someone, you would hear people also in a similar vein say, oh, he's a real Christian man, something like that. And that's definitely a moralistic sort of statement about someone. It says nothing about their actual views of the person Jesus Christ. Christian means that you are someone who is under or in the line of someone else. In this case, Christ, Christian. And so that's true. Just pointing at all of these things, which the authors go on and talk about Jordan Peterson and his claims that Christianity has a unique positive impact on individuals and culture. He goes on to talk about Tim DeRoche and calling for something he calls the secular case for Christianity, right? The several secular voices who are once again pointing back to the ancient, as Jude would call it, the faith once for all delivered to the saints, and saying these things have good and wholesome fruit that they bear in our society. But Blake, you're absolutely right. There's a real problem if we say, and that is the benefit of Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, something else that we need to always keep in mind is that whatever it is that we do, if we are identified as Christian, then we are representing Christ. And so what people see is the Christ in us, forever good or bad. If we're doing good and not promoting the word, that's really just as bad as not even doing good to start with. So you're right. You guys are both making a great point, and it's important for us to remember that wherever we go and we're identified as Christians, we are Christ on the ground at that point, and we represent Christ. Yeah. And that's hard. I mean, but that's part of being Christian.
Yeah. I think it's part of that line we've got to try to navigate where, we're standard bearers. We try to represent his holiness, and we should never not endeavor to hold up his holiness. But sometimes we hold people to a standard that's stricter than God would. Yes. So sometimes that happens. But somewhere between there's also got to be that genuine place that when somebody comes around and finds, okay, you know what, I hit rock bottom and I met with the Lord, maybe at an addiction program, because that's what's highlighted in this article, or perhaps somewhere else, and they finally find their way to him. We've just got to be very gracious in how we address them after that, because forget Faith Matters for a second, not the show. Please never forget about this program. But just forget about faith issues for a second. Have you ever known somebody that you've just not wanted to have the conversation with them because as soon as you tell them, hey, I bought a lemon, or as soon as you tell them, hey, this didn't work out with this person or whatever, they're going to say, well, I told you so. And sometimes you will avoid that conversation because the last thing anybody wants to hear when they realize they were wrong is, let me tell you exactly how wrong you were. Okay? Like, they get it. They know that. Yeah. So let's encourage them. I'm so glad that you found this. I'm so glad that you found him. Did you know there's more? There's more. I think that's the key.
Yeah. Yeah. And that more, that we're talking about is not a cleaner lifestyle. Right. Right. I think that's, a big part of this. The ancient truths, the ancient wisdom of the Old Testament, of Christianity in itself. Listen, if we just stop there before getting on to what Blake just said, there is more. If we just stop there, then what we come up with is the Daniel diet. right? I mean, no offense if you've tried this, right? That's fine. But my point being, that is not what we are meant to take away from.
That's not the
from
gospel
Daniel.
message.
That's right. Daniel points to the gospel. As a matter of fact, Stone Street later in the article, he says this great thing. He says that Christianity is not true because it works. That's pragmatism. Right? That's the philosophy of pragmatism. Well, if it works, then it's true, and you can kind of gauge something's truth or worth off of whether it works or not. So Stone Street says Christianity is not true because it works, but it does work because it's true.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
That's the point.
And there was one thing in this article that really gives me a little bit of issue that I wanted to bring up this morning, and it says that Christian prayer is not met by positive feelings by most people. Why is it that prayer is not seen as a positive thing by the average person? Why?
I think there's a couple reasons. I mean, you would, I'm sure you gentlemen have come across this too. Sometimes you'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll say, well, I tried praying and it didn't change anything.
Again, what they say is it didn't
change.
Work.
Yeah,
it
didn't
is what
work.
I hear.
Yeah.
But I ask, well, what did you expect it to work on?
Yep. Well, the number one relationship killer amongst anybody, to me, is unmet expectations. That's why you end up in divorces, things like that. And honestly, faith is a relationship with the Lord. And if you're going into prayer saying, well, if I do this, if I check the boxes, if I say the right thing, then I'm going to get what I want. Yeah. And then you don't, you're going to say, well, I tried it. It didn't work.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people out there who will then, from a pulpit, point at you and say, well, then your faith wasn't strong enough.
You should have prayed more.
You need to faith harder or something like that. But yeah, I think, Blake, you're right. An unmet expectation. Yeah. I would also add to that, listen, prayer at its foundation is speaking to a deity.
Right.
And honestly, regarding our last article where it says, it's actually this article where it says Christianity has nothing to hide. Although I do think that that's true, and I do think that the wisdom, the philosophy, the rationality of Christianity wins the day in the public marketplace, the free marketplace of ideas. Christianity is the best thing going. I'd put it up against anything. However, at the same time, I do think that if most people in America knew just how radical Christianity is, I think that they would want us to hide even more. I think that they would put us away. So prayer, specifically, you're telling me that you talk to a being in the up there somewhere
that we can't see.
Yeah, that you can't see, and that you not only talk to him, but a large part of you talking to him is your expressed dependence and trust on that just that unseen, unknown being out there. That sounds insane, and it should sound insane to the world's system.
But we all know, all three of us have experienced prayer in a way that we know that it works. Even when we don't get the answer that we want, or when we don't seem to get an answer for any specific prayer, we know that prayer works, and we've seen it enough that we trust God does hear it and He does respond. And yet communicating that to people is difficult if they have not personally experienced it themselves. I think it's awful for somebody to have the idea that they go and they check the boxes, just like you said earlier, Blake, that they check the boxes and therefore everything's just going to be done for them. What an awful presentation of the gospel to them to start with, so that they end up with that idea. And we have to work steadily against that kind of false narrative going out about prayer.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times we'll say, as an example on why we think people should pray, hey, look, one time I was in this situation, I prayed, and God did come through for me. And we're trying, trying to express, hey, and this will happen to you too. Yeah. It just doesn't always. But we got to be genuine there too.
Yes, and
absolutely.
We will be genuine as we continue Faith Matters right after these messages.
Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station. It's an incredible program where we just have local pastors discussing different viewpoints on topical things that are happening. And Pastor Bill, you've got a pretty interesting article here to talk about.
Yes, I do. This one's coming out of ABC News, and the title of the article is After Leak, Religious Rift Over Legal Abortion on Display. The piece is written by Deepa Bharat and Luis Andres Hanau from the Associated Press. The beginning of the piece reads, "A reversal of the 49-year-old Roe versus Wade ruling has never felt more possible since a draft opinion was leaked this week. While religious believers at the heart of the decades-old fight over abortion are shocked at the breach of high court protocol, they are still as deeply divided and their beliefs on the contentious issues as entrenched as ever. National polls show that most Americans support abortion access. A Public Religion Research Institute survey from March found that a majority of religious groups believe it should be legal in most cases, with the exception of white evangelical Protestants, 69% of whom said the procedure should be outlawed in most or all cases. In conservative Christian corners, the draft opinion has sparked hope. Faith groups that have historically taken a strong anti-abortion stance, including the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, have urged followers to pray for Roe's reversal. No faith is monolithic on the abortion issue, yet many followers of faiths that don't prohibit abortion are aghast that a view held by a minority of Americans could supersede their individual rights and religious beliefs."
Wow, what a biased article we have here from ABC News.
Well, they give
No
a lot
surprise.
of voice to both conservative Christians in the piece, as well as other religions, as well as not so conservative Christians.
But the stats that they present here as fact are opinion. When they say that the decades-old fight over abortion shocked at the breach of the high court protocol, I don't think that that has anything to do with religious believers at all. I think we as Americans are shocked at the breach of protocol from the high court there. But it goes on to paint this whole idea of people for or against abortion as being a white male issue. They're trying to draw sides here and push this off as something that is not, saying that most of the American public is for abortion. Well, that's just not true. That is only from a survey that they done that had wording in a particular way so that it would cause people to want to answer the way they want them answered. These are not real surveys, and they're projecting them as though this is something real, and they're trying to make a divide between us here. And that's exactly what the left often does, is they try to divide and call sides so that we can have opposition instead of trying to see how we can work together to best come to a solution on the issue. The fact that Roe versus Wade might be overturned just says that it's not going to be codified in the United States of America's code or justice system. Then it's left up to the states to decide what to do.
Well, there was also an interesting survey put out by Fox News as well. If you're not keen on ABC, then you might like Fox News. Fox News had a survey very recently in which their story on that survey begins that more than 6 in 10 registered voters continue to believe the U.S. Supreme Court should uphold Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, and they often cite the 50 years of precedent.
Right, that
well,
it's the law.
200 years, or almost 200 years before that, it was not the precedent. Sure. And so that was a major change. What is the problem with going back?
Well, let me just start by saying this. I mean, regardless leaning right or left or whatever, until recently, I think I'd be among a great majority of people who would say they never thought that Roe versus Wade could get overturned in America.
Yeah,
I just,
I agree.
regardless of whether you like it or not, I think a lot of people never thought that would happen, and here we are.
Yeah.
The
After
difference
Roe,
is,
and then normally we don't even think of Doe. There was another case, Doe, and then after that, Casey as well. Those three and the precedents being set there, is I mean, it is quite historic,
Yeah.
I would say. And I do think, Brian, to your point, that a lot of what you read, a lot of the outrage that you read in this piece, and the piece goes on and on, pulling in voices from different religions, Jewish, Muslims, Buddhist, Sikh, which, it's no big surprise that different people of different religions have different worldviews on life. But I wanted to say that, it's very interesting that a lot of the things that are being said by these people today were being said by conservative Christians 49 years ago when Roe was put into place to begin with. They were saying, hey, you're pushing something, on us that we do not, that my liberty is crying out against.
Yeah. Now, it's obviously been the law of the land federally for some time, but honestly, if you do just a cursory digging into the original storyline, Roe versus Wade, the woman who was represented there, it didn't even benefit her. It wasn't even a genuine thing. Years later, she would come out and say that she actually was of faith and against it. But then after that, we would find out that there was a pro-life organization that was funding her money to make her change her opinion. And on her deathbed, she had a confession that she didn't really care either way.
Right.
And so we're all now sitting here fighting over the scraps of what have happened legislatively years and years ago. What they're saying is, should this be a federal issue, their job is to sit there and assess and look at and survey the law and say, should this be a federal issue or should it go to the states? But what people are hearing is, you're going to take away my freedom.
Exactly.
So if you can reframe the argument, it makes it sound completely different.
It sure does. As a matter of fact, the main point that that this leaked brief is making is not on abortion. The main point is that Roe versus Wade should have never happened to begin with.
Correct.
Basically, what this comes down to, from my perspective, humbly, this is Pastor Bill Klear speaking now. If anyone wants to send ugly emails to Ross at the Talk Station, you can do that. But from my opinion, this comes down to cowardice of the Congress, of Senate, 49 years ago, who just decided to kick the pail down the road and let their legislative responsibilities be taken up by the judicial branch.
Right. Yes, you are right.
If they had done their job 49 years ago, then this would have never happened. And I do think that that's what Alito is trying to get across in his opinion piece here, is to say, hey, this should have never landed on the Supreme Court to begin with. We need to get rid of it because this is not our job, and this is overreach. And now, of course, people are saying, well, this is overreach in order to undo that mistaken decision that many years ago.
Well, I have an opinion I'd like to share.
What?
Imagine that.
So we addressed this actually at Liberty not long ago. Last Sunday, and honestly,
no, that's Liberty Church, not Liberty University.
That is correct.
Just to be clear. Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
because you may have heard different things there. No, we just addressed this, and here's the reality. Both when you look in Proverbs, it talks about clothing yourself in kindness, wearing it like a necklace. You can read through the book of Romans, and it talks about how it's God's kindness that draws us to repentance. And so here we have a chunk of people that have felt like their rights were trampled on to protect unborn babies for years and years and years. Now you have a chunk of people that feel like their rights are being, tread upon, and there's very little kindness in this discussion. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this earlier this hour, about how it's important that we are able to discuss things with people we disagree with and not have it conveyed like we hate them or we feel like they hate us. And so this is obviously a very sensitive subject for many people for many, many reasons. And the truth is that even amongst those who believe in my body, my choice or whatever, a lot of times they'll have an abortion and they will deal with guilt or shame for years and years and years. So we sometimes will be very flippant in how we talk about our opinion, and we have no clue who we're talking to and how it's hitting them. So we just need to clothe ourselves in kindness as we navigate this. It does appear it's going to get overturned, which would be a very historic thing, but we've got to clothe ourselves in kindness. Again, people need to have a reason why they're willing to talk to us about it other than told you so.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, Blake, in this article, 3 separate times the word compassion is used. And each of those times it is framed as though a pro-abortion stance is the compassionate stance.
Right.
And that anyone who is for life, for the life of the yet unborn, that they are actually just vampires and, cloaked and just trying to get across across their political, stance in this kind of thing. When really, I totally agree that, of course, this is one of those cases that we read about a moment ago, where even when we're doing the right thing, we're going to be maligned. And we know that. Scripture tells us this, that we will be maligned and that those who slander us will be shown in the end to have to stand judgment for that. However, I do think that no matter what is being said about us, we must come at this with compassion. I don't even like to talk about the fight for this or that, which is often the way that it's phrased. And so let me just listeners, just indulge me for just a moment here to point your attention to our local pregnancy care center. The Coastal Pregnancy Care Center is there for you if you are in need, or if you know someone who could use care on this, abortion minded, thinking about it, post, for anyone who needs a helping hand to come alongside them, they are there for you. So look them up, get in touch with the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center if you're in need.
Yeah, it's important to know that there are other options there. This is not the only option if you feel overwhelmed or don't know what to do. There are other options. We would just implore you, please look into them, as well as other things.
And we
There's
do
a lot
have
of
great
options.
local resources for
Absolutely.
that,
Absolutely. And most of the local churches could point you there too. Thank you guys for hanging with us. We'll be back with more of Faith Matters right after this.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on the Talk Station. You are listening to Faith Matters with Blake Larson, pastor at Liberty Church, my good friend Bryan Lassiter from Creek United Methodist, and I am Bill Klear from Open Door Baptist Church. And for our final segment of the morning, we are going straight into the Senate. What do you say, Bryan?
Yes, a story from Christian Headlines by Michael Faust, and the title is Pro-Life Senators Block Radical Abortion Bill That Would Overturn 500 Pro-Life Laws. And the article says a coalition of pro-life and moderate senators teamed up Wednesday to block a Biden administration-backed bill that would have ensured abortion remains legal nationwide even if the U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. It was the second vote on the bill this year, but the first since a leaked Supreme Court draft opinion indicated the justices may overturn the landmark 1973 decision. The bill, H.R. 3755, says its purpose is to permit health care providers to provide abortion services without limitations or requirements. Further, it explicitly says it supersedes all state laws. Under the bill, abortion laws and regulations are illegal if they do not significantly advance reproductive health or the safety of abortion services. The bill notes that since 2011, states and local governments have passed nearly 500 restrictions on abortions. Parental consent laws, for example, likely would be in peril had the bill become law. Pro-life groups applauded the Senate's action. The so-called Women's Health Act would have prohibited most, if not all, the reasonable state laws related to abortion that are currently in place to protect the health of pregnant mothers, the dignity of unborn children, and the integrity of the medical profession. Guys, this article, again, as most of the ones we look at by Michael Faust, is well written and gives us a great point of view and points out maybe some hypocrisy that is here. As usual, we see a lot of things that go on in the Senate to come up for debate or to be passed really contain things that are not in the description, and they do it in a way that is not on the surface. And I'm thankful that we had enough senators to see that in this case and vote against it, even one across the aisle to come and vote against it, because he said that it would, in fact, have abortions be the law of the land instead of that rare thing that we were told in the 1990s was supposed to be.
Right. And not only was that significant, also significant that there are a couple Republicans that are actually pro-choice that still opposed this bill. And I think it's interesting that this was not something that was promoted early on. This is something that was clearly reactionary to some of the leaks from the Supreme Court, was meant to go in and try to sweep through and reframe things so that regardless of what happened at the Supreme Court, that they would still have their agenda taken care of. Now, I would not support somebody doing something that subversive regardless of the side of it, but this is obviously a hot button issue. The Supreme Court is meant to help understand and dictate what is a federal issue and what should be allowed to the states. So to make sweeping legislation that would radically cripple the state's ability to make their own decisions, just to me seems like a really, really poor reaction to the current climate.
Yeah, this was definitely a way just to kind of paint, everyone where they are. It's obvious that this is timed for the midterm elections to kind of put some targets on people's backs, if you will, and show the power base who they're to support and who they're not to support, and those sorts of things. So there will be some fallout from this. We all of us, Schumer included, Majority Leader Schumer, we knew how this was going to play out as far as the maybe not specifically down to the person, but we knew the major outcome. The thing that I wanted to point out straight off the top here is that I keep hearing regarding this vote about how due to overcome a filibuster, they were not able to overcome the filibuster. I keep hearing that in this piece and in this context, but to me, I find that actually to be secondary to the point that they could not even get a majority.
Yes.
49 to 51. That is in Senate election terms, or in Senate voting terms, that is far from, you can't even see the filibuster line from 49.
Which takes 60.
Yeah, which takes 60. And out again in Senate votes, so I think that the bigger story here is not about not being able to overcome the filibuster, as though, a few brave, conservative voices were holding back the tide of that kind of, listen, they could not even get a majority on this, much less the filibuster.
And the Senator Joe Manchin, who is the Democrat who voted against it, said that had it been a straightforward bill to keep Roe in place, he would have been for it. But since it was so sweeping, he just could not vote for it.
And let me, for our erudite listeners out there, let me suggest that you go soon, sometime maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, Monday, or maybe for your Sunday evening tonight. Well, let me suggest that you actually take up Roe versus Wade and read the Supreme Court opinion on that, the majority opinion and decision, I should say, on that. I think that there might be some things in there that you would be a bit surprised about. Roe is actually much more sweeping than most people, I think, actually expect that it is. The phrase in Roe regarding a woman's health, which now is understood to be not just physical health, but mental or even emotional health, basically means that a woman can, or anyone can get a doctor's note, which just says, for health, abortion suggested, and that's it. And an abortion can be provided at that time under Roe. And this, Brian, as you said, and as the article points out clearly, this is far more radical than even Roe. Basically, any time through even the third trimester, which is simply a concept that was invented at Roe in order to distinguish and give some delimitation to human gestation. That was not accepted practice even at the time. But now, even with this, abortion could be legal, attainable. We have passed the days, as Brian you just referenced, of Clinton's favorite phrase regarding abortion, that it should be, what was it, safe.
And rare.
Legal, safe, and rare.
Yeah.
And now what they want is legal, safe, and don't tell your parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think one of the bigger issues with this too, and obviously it is all centered around abortion, right? But the bigger issue for me is what kind of precedent does this then set? That 500 different state laws could get wiped off the book. The whole goal of this country is that we're a more perfect union. And while we're not close to the perfect part, we are a union. So we're a blending. And the idea is that if you like the law of the land in Virginia better than Colorado, go to Virginia. If you like it better in Texas, go to Texas. And so what happens when, I'm not trying to be too political, but how big do you want the government to be? How much do you want them to be able to dictate what you are allowed to do on a federal level?
Good point.
When the whole goal is that you are supposed to be able to go to a place that suits your needs best, that is your choice, because you have that freedom. And to wipe 500 state laws off the books, especially in a reactionary period, to me is a word that I don't use often. It's unconscionable.
Unconscionable and unconstitutional.
I said it.
And Blake, I see you're unconscionable, and I add unconstitutional to it. You know, Blake, actually, you bring up a fantastic point, and I have to say, and this might kind of sound sort of conspiracy theorist here, so normally we leave that to Brian, but today I'm gonna take that up, and I'm just gonna say that. Listen, this sounds eerily similar to a previous phase of U.S. history in which states' rights were on the table in order to determine who had the privileges of personhood and who did not.
It's true.
I, for one, just kind of get a bit chilled when I hear some of this language being repeated, which I thought that the one of the darkest periods in U.S. history should have taken care of that. And now here we are once again kind of debating, well, who gets to be a person due to their skin color or due to their age?
Yeah, or their infirmity.
Or their infirmity.
And in places like China, their sex.
Sure.
Once you start down that slippery slope, where do you stop? And I think we need to head it off at the very beginning that it's just not the thing that we do.
That's the beautiful thing about this country. This country is not just America. It is the United States of America. And while there are other states and provinces and other countries and things like that, the beautiful thing here is that each one gets to act with that level of autonomy to dictate and govern according to the needs of the people that it represents, rather than just, one giant country the way that it would be with China or, Russia or whatever. No. You are here, you're in North Carolina. But if you don't like it, there are other states to go. And that, to me, is one of the key things under attack.
But I do feel like this is, this sort of identifier that Schumer wanted to place on every person, that kind of mark. You're going to mark. You're going to be on the record for this. I do think that this is going to have fallout, in the Senate and beyond. And so it's definitely not over. We're waiting. We're pushing. We're not giving up. We're not slacking off in any way. Well, folks, I do hope from Pastor Blake and Pastor Bryan and myself, Pastor Bill, we all hope that you are preparing to join a church family this morning to worship the Lord Jesus Christ. And we also hope that you will return next week here at the talk station where faith matters.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. To revisit today's program or to find more episodes, visit thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.